and welcome to the very first episode of Season 8 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are starting our next book, Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think by George Lakoff. Should be an interesting book. We're reading the third edition, originally published in 1996. This version was published in 2016. And essentially this book is the first linguistics book that we've done. We've talked about it in the past, like looking at how language impacts society and stuff like that. But this is the first one that actually handles that. I don't know how much you know about George Lakoff, if anything.
I haven't. I've heard that other to do a search because I was trying to be, I kind of do a blank slate
Hmm.
because you had indicated he probably and I saw he was from Berkeley, the University of Berkeley, but he's old enough that he fits my standards of not really wanting to read anything written by anybody who hasn't graduated from college. If you graduate from college after the 1960s, I don't want to read anything you write
Mm-hmm.
academically, philosophically. And I think he fits that, but it was
Hmm.
Berkeley. I don't know, so, and then I could tell from reading it that he's a lefter.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I really don't want to know how left, I
Hmm.
don't want to know, how much he has defamed
Hmm.
me personally, but me
Yes.
as a member of any number of groups. I kind of guess that. So what do you know about him? You want to share with me and the listener?
So he is the listener. There's he's kind of a big figure in like the field of sociolinguistics and psycholinguistics. So sociolinguistics is a study of how like language affects society. Psycho is like how we process things in our minds and stuff like that. It's like the more like actual like technical workings of the brain and stuff like that. But essentially his whole deal is that the way we use language is predominantly through a series of metaphors. So the farther away we get from like physical like reality, the more we get into more abstract concepts, the more metaphors we're going to use for our language because we don't have as direct ways of explaining what it is that we're talking about. And so he uses like I took a sociolinguistics class, which was pretty awful because it's just absurd. But essentially, what he argues is like things like, talking about arguments, we use like war metaphors because, say I won the argument, my points were indefensible, blah, 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 stuff like that. Like the more abstract the concept is, the more we use like sort of creative language and metaphors to frame that concept. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what he's talking about throughout this book. I
So,
don't think,
I need to interrupt you.
yeah.
So, sociolinguistics, do you think was it you mentioned not being happy with the class? Was it because of the class or the teacher, or because the entire subject matter you didn't appreciate?
All three, I think, because sociolinguistics could be something that's really interesting. Because at its core, it's like I said, it should be about how language affects society or how society sort of frames language. Because each language really sort of frames concepts differently in certain ways, and you're not entirely, but in certain ways, things are presented in different formats, and that should be what sociolinguistics is looking into: how we present the same concepts throughout different languages. But all of sociolinguistics, especially now at this point in time, is if you use that word, you're racist. Actually, if you use this word, and it's about a power hierarchy, is how people frame linguistics now, which is sort of on the Marxist school of thought that everything's dependent on your societal power and everything. People with more power in society use their language as a weapon against other people, and that's sort of where the field of sociolinguistics is at now. He's a little bit before all of that, but he's definitely still in a similar vein. And I think especially with sociolinguistics, you have a lot more of the discussion of like everything is a man-made concept. Everything's a societal construct. There's no real reality behind these things. I think that's exactly what he's talking about in a lot of this book, is
Mhm.
that, we're just using metaphors because this thing doesn't actually exist in any concrete way. It's all a construct that we use these metaphors to talk about.
Yeah, it's. I think it's an interesting field.
Hmm.
It seems more like social work or social theory
Hmm.
or some sort of vague philosophical discussion
Hmm.
about people's motives.
Yeah.
And I think there could be some merit in that
Hmm.
area of, I don't know if you'd say study. I think it seems like that's kind of like social philosophy or something.
Yeah.
Topics, political and social current affairs type discussions.
Hmm.
I think it might be interesting, but he clearly views this as a science,
Hmm.
and as if you can measure it
Hmm.
in a way It seems like,
Yeah.
for just the preface and the first chapter, that's he's asserting that.
Hmm.
And I doubt I'm trying not to prejudge him. Tend to be a quick to judge,
Hmm.
but maybe that's because of my conservative moral philosophy, the strong father figure
Hmm.
type of thing that he's talking about already. I feel I'm going to be um, talking about that the entire book, because I guess that's really his
Hmm.
big dichotomy
Yeah.
is conservatives believe in a strong father figure, family type
Hmm.
philosophy, and the liberals have the nurturing mother
Yeah.
deity, whatever.
Yeah, because that's what he says, throughout the preface and like the first chapters, like why he even thought to look into this is because he was, essentially like watching the news and he realized that, politicians were always talking about the government as if it was our family, like how we take care of our citizens, how we educate them and stuff like that. And he's like, it seems to me like both, liberals and conservatives use this family metaphor, but they take it in two entirely different directions. And that's where you get the strict father versus
Yeah.
nurturant mother.
And I think I really I do think that some of what he says initially, and I feel like he's going to say throughout this book, a lot of it I think is going to be beneficial in the sense of how to effectively communicate your ideas and ideals to
Hmm.
people who are not of your group,
Mm.
and to frame them in different ways. And I think that's very, very helpful. I'll say this, like I went to oh God, what was it? Was a leadership thing through St. Genevieve, and they had a guest speaker. It was really interesting. They talked
Hmm.
about different personality types, and it was granted it was shorthand, but basically there's like kind of like they designated with certain colors for different personality
Hmm.
types. But I thought it was really helpful because I've struggled with communicating with people in a way that they understand what I'm trying to say, and for me to be able to communicate in terms that make sense to other people, because sometimes I don't do a great job of communicating. Um, like for instance, um, I don't think about people's personal lives
Hmm.
as much as like coworkers or people that are attorneys I know. I don't really inquire about their personal lives because I just kind of think that's their business. But a lot of people, and granted, I'm 53 years old. I should know this already, but it's still revealing to me on a regular basis that, oh, people want me to ask about their personal lives
Hmm.
because that shows that I care, as opposed to just doing the things that are necessary to show that I care, taking care of them, or like with employees, giving them a raise or a good review or whatever. But I'm supposed to also ask about their dogs and stuff and remember things like that. Like their kid's birthday. I mean, I'm supposed to know that, I'm
Yeah.
supposed to care about that. And my personality, and I'm not saying it's just because I was born that way. I mean, I consider it a deficiency, but I kind of feel like what he's talking about here is, and I probably should look up the training materials because it may be based upon some of what he's talking about in this book, because
Mhm.
it's a relatively new kind of, not, I mean, it's probably about 15 to 20 years old type of training session. It's really about communicating with people that have different types of personalities and just doing a better job of
Mhm.
expressing yourself in terms that they will not be offended, and terms that they will be receptive to. And I think
Yeah.
that is beneficial because, especially when you're talking about politics, you want to be able to say, like there are people that expect the government to take care of you. And so you can't just say to them, take care of yourself, you lazy bum. You know, it's not the government's job or my job to take care of you. Well, they're going to be receptive to that
Mhm.
because for various reasons, including it's kind of scary. It's kind of scary for a lot of people to not have an expressed, um, not even just a safety net, but more of like a safety couch for them. And so I'm hoping that I can get some benefits from this. But he's clearly right out of the box.
Yeah.
He's straight left wing,
Mhm.
but I do appreciate, like in the preface, which I often don't even read prefaces, but this is a preface to the third edition. The second paragraph, he's talking about initially the effects of global warming are also ubiquitous. Massive storms and floods, droughts and fires, sea levels rise, and water shortages, mass migrations of fish and birds, as well as species extinctions, and he's saying this as if it's all 100% true
Hmm.
and based upon global warming. And it was, he was so struck by years ago, the first mention of global warming to him, and it was such a catastrophic concept
Hmm.
that he didn't understand why people who are conservatives, those evil bastards, wouldn't take this obvious
Hmm.
scientific risk seriously. Well, all of that is a bunch of bullshit.
Hmm.
Part of my language. I mean, meaning that it's not exact. I'm not saying the climate's not changing. Of
Hmm.
course, it does. And I was mentioning to Eli, and he always just, your brother just shakes his head when I say these things. But yeah, I said, yeah, he was talking about global warming and how I was kind of dismissing somebody
Hmm.
or another. And I said, yeah, how did those Great Lakes, how did they get created? I mean, weren't they frozen? I think they were frozen before, weren't they? Weren't there like glaciers?
Hmm.
Like there's a thing called the Ice Age. What happened to that? Why aren't we in the Ice Age? Well, because of global warming.
Hmm.
And of course there are some benefits. And this is, I'm going off on a
Yeah, this
tangent.
is his
But
first rant of the season
first
here.
rant, but the fact of the matter is, there are some positive effects of global warming
Hmm.
on a small scale because you're going to get more arable land in North Russia, North Europe, and Canada.
Hmm.
They can't grow certain things because the growing season is too short. And so, the same thing happened, after the Ice Age, and a huge blooming of of writing and knowledge and science happened after the globe warmed
Hmm.
and during human history, and allowed those things to happen. But anyway, so you can see, he has an obvious bias. He does acknowledge it
Hmm.
as a liberal or leftist or whatever he calls himself. And so I do appreciate that, but he is really so far left. He thinks he's being magnanimous
Hmm.
by saying, "Oh, we need to." The Republicans just think of things. Of course, they're all wrong,
Hmm.
but they think of things in a different manner. This
Hmm.
strong, patriarchal type of moral philosophy, um, but right out of the box, he's bam, global warming. He doesn't
Yeah.
understand what don't expect that, and then he talks about the horrific. It shows how it's not timely anymore. The horrific ISIL regime. That's the Islamic State in the Levant,
Hmm.
um, which Trump bombed into extinction. So I don't know if the listener remembers that, but he executed the leader bombing campaign, and they don't even hear about them
Yeah.
anymore. They were taking over that whole region for a period of time,
Hmm.
and the United States and others, but mostly the United States, just bombed the hell out of them
Yeah.
and ended it. So I would be kind of interested in how the author would look at that reference now. Would he give
Hmm.
any credit to that blowhard Trump, and the conservatives
Yeah.
that supported him or not?
Well, I
So
think it's also important, to note that this is like almost a 30-year-old book now in its original format, and he's updated some things, as of 2016, but this is still pre, Trump presidency, as you mentioned. I think things have definitely changed even over the past, less than 10 years
for
with,
sure,
the whole conservative platform and things like that. So this is already kind of looking almost back in time away. And I think that could be helpful too to examine, how things have changed compared to, the parties of 30 years ago, if we take his opinions to be correct. But I do agree with what you're saying. Like throughout this, he is sort of assuming, that the reader, I think, is a left wing
yes,
person. Because I've noticed like throughout, these first couple sections here, all of the examples he gives are like of the conservative viewpoint. He's like, well, we have to understand, where they are coming from. And he's already positioning himself like outside of, understanding what their opinion is. And he's always sort of framing it like we have to understand where these, this isn't the words he uses, but it's sort of that air of we have to understand where these simple-minded people are coming from. Like, look at these metaphors they're using. We have to get into their mind, and so we can figure out how to defeat them. Is sort of the attitude that I get from these first couple sections.
that's exactly what it is, and it's a standard gorillas in the mist journalistic effort where the left wing reporter goes to Trump world and oh, look at these strange creatures. I'm going to try to understand them. And
Hmm.
then I asked them about a charity, for the poor and the downtrodden, and they took me to their church where they raise money and they do things for poor people, and there's no government involved. And it's so strange. And and wonderful and weird and scary at the same time. It's like we're some sort of subspecies
Hmm.
in the jungle, and you see this over and over and over and over again. I forget who first really brought my attention to it, but it was in the 1980s.
Hmm.
That's how long ago this trope has been. This kind of writing has been going on about these people that are so ensconced in their own weird liberal bubble,
Yeah.
and but I will give him this, that he's at least trying to understand
Hmm.
the other, you know. So
Yeah.
I get that. You know, we're so bombarded with the liberals, we know them,
Hmm.
but they don't even know who we are. This is, you know, so revealing to him. Like, you know, in another example, I'm not going to go on the rant, but he mentions the Citizens United decision, which
Hmm.
is not even mentioned anymore, but it was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's when Obama was called a liar by Judge Alito during the State of the Union, because he's talked about money and politics in this bad decision. And Alito says, I think he said not true. Like, I
Hmm.
don't think he said liar. But you know, he's talked about pumping billions into the conservative Supreme Court, pumping billions into the Republican election coffers. The Republicans have been outspent by the Democrats by a wide margin ever since that decision.
Yeah.
So it's those kind of things that are so jarring. Like you said, it's old enough, and the preface is old enough. It's
Hmm.
like, wow, this guy's a partisan hack at
Hmm.
the time, because he just bought everything the Democrats were shoveling into his
Hmm.
head, and he's trying to make out that he is some unique, independent observer of
Hmm.
language, and he's going to be able to explain
Yeah.
to fair-minded liberal how to communicate with these weirdos.
Hmm. And that's what he says throughout. He splits the book into a couple sections, and he says, the first several sections, he says, I'm going to be, an outside observer. I'm just looking at how this all works. But then in the last section, he's going to argue explicitly in favor of the liberal worldview, which I think will be the most fun section of this book, maybe, or the most infuriating. But you can already tell throughout, even in these, quote unquote objective sections, he already has an idea of what is right and what is wrong. He's already presenting that, even just in his writing style.
Yeah, and he talks about, he does make a good point that in the sense all politics are
Hmm.
moral, and I
Yeah.
agree with that. There's everybody who has any sort of political system belief, you know, that they have some sort of comprehensive idea of what's right or wrong politically. It's based upon their own personal morality, and so
Hmm.
I think he's right. I think there is a sense of the desire for the government to be your mommy,
Hmm.
the left wing, and 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 when conservatives talk about things, they do talk about in analogies like a parent, like the tough love parent, as opposed to just the parent that gives everything to the child. And so I think there's some truth to those arguments that are made by analogy,
Hmm.
because the left side wants to act like they're giving stuff to you.
Yeah.
But we're all paying for it. It's not,
Hmm.
they aren't giving it out of their own pocket. This is our stuff. They're just
Yeah.
spreading it around. But he also, the other thing is, like on page was it Roman numeral 11 for the preface.
Hmm.
He describes conservative. You know, he of course praises liberals for their points of view. He says conservatives usually have a smaller list of apparently unrelated general principles. They vary somewhat, but here's a typical short list: smaller government, free markets, personal responsibility, lower taxes, strong defense, traditional family values. But you know, the funny thing is that Trump has kind of mixed up some of this stuff,
Hmm.
because the conservatives, well, there's a lot of conservatives that believe in free markets, but
Hmm.
the Republican Party and the more mainstream conservatives now don't want free markets. They want
Hmm.
fair trade, not free trade. And so there's a lot of changing. There's a lot of mixing in of these principles as far as government spending, because mainstream conservative, like Hawley,
Hmm.
is talking about funding programs for families and children and single mothers and that kind of stuff that are not, there weren't, wouldn't have been considered to be conservative 20 years ago. You know, they
Yeah.
would be left wing ideas out there on the union line and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So I think it's changing, you know, and it has changed since then. But anyway, so, and then he talks about what's a moderate. And
Hmm.
I do like this, because he says a moderate progressive is mostly progressive, but has some conservative views in some issues.
Hmm.
Moderates are progressives. All right,
Hmm.
they're just nicer about it. All
Hmm.
right, and so a moderate Republican is just a Democrat who's nice about it
Yeah.
to Republicans and doesn't hate the Republicans as much. So he's right about that.
Hmm.
I'll give him. And he says moderate progressive or conservative may be pragmatic. That is, they're willing to compromise to get as close as possible to his or her strongly held beliefs, which is BS. They're no more compromising than anybody else.
Yeah.
They're just not as argumentative as
Hmm.
people that are a little bit more left.
Yeah. But I do agree with what he says, kind of going on from there, that there is no middle, right? We don't have like a middle party, essentially. There is no like middle point. You just are likely going to have one of the two worldviews, but you might take a couple issues here and there from the other side, but it will all fit within your same worldview. You're not going to have like a blended worldview that sort of incorporates all of these issues at once, if that makes sense.
I do tend to agree, but I do have a sense that it's kind of like we're in a transition period. So there's
Mm.
going to be mixing it up
Yeah.
because like this it's such a weird thing for me, a person my age, to seeing somebody like Trump, who I know is from prior to him getting involved in politics, was kind of like a celebrity buffoon, and a moral reprobate. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really what he was. I mean, with his affairs and all that kind of stuff, and for him to be at the forefront of mixing up the entire political system almost single-handedly,
Hmm.
it's just so jarring to somebody like me. But I think there is a mixing up, and I think he's caught on to the working class themes that he's always actually been pretty consistent about. He's always
Hmm.
hated free trade. Back in the 80s, he hated the Jap. Well, he didn't hate him, but he would criticize the Japanese. The Japanese are eating their lunch and they're getting this and that.
Hmm.
Japanese were ascendant at the time, and now it's China. It's very almost the same word for word criticisms, but I think there may be a middle ground for a transitionary period. You
Mm.
know, that makes sense. And then we're going to kind of separate out, okay, who's for this kind of thing, and then it'll be left or right.
Yeah.
But I think he's right about the just two types of major philosophy about government role in society.
Hmm.
One is the government's your mother, and the other one is it's a limited thing, and you know you're not my mother, all right?
Hmm.
You're not my mom, you're not my dad. You're some government bureaucrat, and that is
Hmm.
that tension. I think that's a separation. You see the whole world differently politically, depending
Yeah.
on where you're coming from. So I tend to agree
Hmm.
with him on his ultimate conclusion.
Hmm.
And he talks about what if the next section in the preface, what if the facts don't fit with the worldview? And of course, he's really directing that at the conservatives
Hmm.
as opposed to the liberals. Um, and he says there are four things that can happen. Um, the fact may be changed to fit your worldview. The fact could be ignored. The fact could be rejected as possibly ridiculed. Or the facts, if threatening to your worldview, may be attacked. He forgot the fifth one, or your worldview could change.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't give any credit to anybody,
Hmm.
that anybody can be confronted with facts and change their mind. Because
Hmm.
I even though I think the global warming extremists, sometimes I think it's not even useful to talking to them. But if you actually do get into the data with them, I think you can eventually change
Hmm.
their mind. I think it won't be that day,
Hmm.
but 6 months later, like for instance, the whole COVID thing. I'll mention COVID for the
Huh.
first time in this
There we
episode.
go. Good.
But I think that the people are generally, even the mass Nazis, are coming around to the conclusion, oh, you know what? They don't even want to talk about it
Yeah.
because I think they're on some level they're like, that was messed up, you
Hmm.
know. And because the facts are just so clear that the mask didn't do anything for this respiratory virus, didn't
Hmm.
slow anything down, and they got out of control, but they were lied to,
Hmm.
so I think their worldview is slowly changing. I
Yeah.
think it does work over time.
Hmm.
My worldview has changed on a lot of different issues, important issues,
Hmm.
and
And I think
yeah, go
a
ahead.
lot of this is tied to his complete like because he's very much a relativist, I think, and a very much like a very materialist worldview. That there's nothing beyond what we say and things like that. Everything is sort of created by us. And so he kind of has that idea that everybody is going to be stuck within their worldview no matter what. Their worldview cannot change
Mm.
because the facts cannot impact it, because the worldview is just separate. It's our language. It's not tied to any real thing necessarily, because we're getting farther and farther away from reality with our words, essentially. And
Yes.
so we can't change our worldview, which
Yeah.
I think is wrong.
Yeah, I put in the margin of one of these pages that he's an atheist. So I don't know if he
Oh,
is,
absolutely. Yeah.
but it certainly seems that way to me. But he mentions, as I was saying, he mentions like that it takes an extraordinary openness, training, and awareness of this phenomenon to pay critical attention, basically to be able to change your mind.
Hmm.
And he has this opinion of other people that they're not as smart as him,
Hmm.
and it's always dangerous as a writer or as a philosopher if you think there's only some people that can figure it
Hmm.
out. And it's important for philosophers to have more interactions on a deeper level with people that are not highly educated, because you realize how stupid you are.
Yeah. What?
Because if I go out into a farm, I don't know anything about animal husbandry,
Hmm.
and these guys, and men and women who work a farm, man, they are effing geniuses.
Yeah.
They're like gods out there. They're creating things. I mean, they're growing stuff, and I think that kind of he doesn't have that kind of humility.
Hmm.
I think that's dangerous when you're trying to explain, and he kind of demeans
Yeah.
everybody,
Hmm.
as if you use this language, you can be manipulated, and,
Hmm.
and you'll never change your mind, and your philosophy is stuck based upon
Yeah.
your moral outlook that I guess you're born with. But we'll
Hmm.
get to that, I guess, in
Yeah.
more detail.
His discussion on Roman numeral 14 is absolutely insane, though I want to say, because he says, really framing that conservatives are the only ones who deny objective realities,
Yeah, right.
the climate deniers. It's not that science deniers say to themselves, I'm going to deny the scientific facts. Instead, their brains work automatically and unconsciously so as to produce the effect of science denial. Of course,
Yeah,
questioning, studies or whatever, because that's not part of the scientific method, is questioning, the arguments put forward and testing them and things like that. But then he goes on to say it's the most like backhanded like compliment almost, because he says because he's framed as though he says science denial is not just relegated to conservatives. Many liberals implicitly learned a worldview about reason itself, a worldview that is at odds with the scientific facts from the cognitive brain sciences. He says they learned that thought is conscious and that it works by logic, and that all people have the same logic, and says this is what liberals are saying. And essentially the point that he comes to is that liberals are wrong for believing that they can change other people's minds. He says that's what liberals get wrong. Not any of their beliefs about, political issues, but believing that, if they present the facts to these stupid conservatives, they can change their minds. And it's like they
right.
keep trying to change their minds, but they're so, obtuse and so stubborn, these conservatives, that the liberals just need to realize that it's not going to work. And, that's the flaw of liberals, is that they're too smart almost. And it's like this is an insane thing to say in the preface to this book.
Well, that was common. That was more
Hmm.
common in the '90s and early aughts, because who was it? It was the election of George W. Bush. There was a famous journalist or commentator that said, it was a woman that said, or it was Nixon's win. It goes that far back. How did Nixon win? I don't know anybody that voted for him. And this person said that out loud in a public venue. It's like,
Hmm.
well, yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's a huge country, you
Yeah.
weirdo. And they just can't.
Hmm.
It's just a lack of humility. Like I know that I could be wrong about global warming. It
Hmm.
could be 100% man-made, and I could be completely wrong. I
Hmm.
understand that as a risk of taking a more strident view on the opposite side, which I don't, I guess I don't really know or care if
Hmm.
it's man-made, because I just don't even see that it's actually warming that much.
Hmm.
And all the predictions have been wrong, by Al Gore and all those nutcases that first started this movement. Um, that everything they said was going to happen hasn't happened. They said the
Hmm.
polar ice caps and all that kind of stuff. And so, he's talking about, it's the normal dismissal of daily facts that don't fit moral worldviews explains why so many conservatives deny global warming in the face not only of the vast range of scientific facts, but even in the face of images of melting glaciers and the reality of droughts and fires.
Hmm.
What did he think happened to glaciers? They have to melt at some point. They're going to stop, right? If the glaciers didn't melt, the whole world would be covered with ice, right? Because glaciers are moving ice, and if they don't melt, what happens?
Yeah.
it's like, well, they're melting more. Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
For how long? And is that so bad?
Hmm.
You know, I really don't know if it's that bad. Depends on
Yeah.
how hot we get. But, you can't say that carbon is a pollutant when it's necessary for all life.
Hmm.
Plants can't survive without carbon in the
Yeah.
atmosphere. So anyway, but it was really a bias and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But then I do think that what really keyed on the next little section is this acknowledgement section, which I usually never read. But
Yes.
at the very end, he talks about how he started thinking about writing this book. He says,
Hmm.
this book began with a conversation in my garden several years ago with my friend, the late Paul Baum. I asked Paul if he could think of a single question, the answer of which would be the best indicator of liberal versus conservative political attitudes. His response: if your baby cries at night, do you pick him up? The attempt to understand this answer led to this book. And I think that's actually not a bad question,
Hmm.
because if you don't, it depends, of course, on if the baby's sick or if the baby needs something.
Sure.
But if your baby is just crying because the baby doesn't want to sleep alone for a full night,
Hmm.
a good parent is not going to pick that baby up.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's hard. Especially your first kid, like was your older brother, Sam. It was hard because your mom studied early childhood development. So
Hmm.
she knew better than I did how to handle these kinds of issues. Says you just can't do it. He just needs to learn that he's going to be able to fall asleep on his own. If he
Hmm.
doesn't, if we go in there and settle him down every time he wakes up and needs comfort, he'll never be able to comfort himself and he'll never get a good night's sleep.
Hmm.
So we just have to endure it. If he's sick or he throws up, or if he's got a fever, if there's something wrong with him, absolutely, we're picking him up, we're taking care of him. So this question is really, I think, it illustrates a dichotomy in people's attitudes towards child rearing,
Hmm.
which I think also is very suggestive of how they look at the government too. I
Hmm.
think he's right, but he reaches a wrong conclusion, which
Hmm.
is if he thinks that I'm assuming he thinks that if the baby cries at night, you should pick it up and be more nurturing and
Hmm.
loving. But being more nurturing and loving sometimes means letting that child be uncomfortable for a period of time so they learn how to comfort themselves, which is
Hmm.
a conservative view of government, where the government shouldn't step in and rescue everybody
Yeah.
from their own mistakes. Now, there should be a safety net. We don't want people starving to death,
Hmm.
because they made bad decisions. But if you look at like Aesop's fable, that the grasshopper and the ants, I think in the original one, I think the grasshopper dies, but the moral of the story is, you work hard, you save now, so that you're not left in a cold winter without any food stored up, because you're going to starve.
Hmm.
And so I thought that was really really interesting that he mentions that that's why he started reading this book, which is we have to figure out, why are these weirdo conservatives, why wouldn't they pick up that baby?
Yeah.
You know, well, because I'm a strident male figure. Cry, I don't care. I guess that's what his conclusion would be.
I guess
Um,
so. You
yeah.
did text me a few days ago when you were reading this. You said, I have a rant about the acknowledgement that involves an Easter egg hunt. What is this?
Yeah, so the Easter egg hunt this
Mhm.
year, I'm not going to mention the charity or the location because I don't
Okay.
want anybody to be mad at them.
Hmm.
But I was a sponsor, our
Okay.
firm was a sponsor of this Easter egg hunt. I was a volunteer of the Easter egg hunt.
Hmm.
So and we put this thing on for decades. All right, and now there's so many of them in the area. We're going to change it up after this experience, but also because it's getting diluted. There's just too many of them
Yeah.
anyway, um so we have different age groups. We got the little babies to one, I think, like 2 and 3, little
Hmm.
toddlers are in a second one. And those areas, parents can go out there and help the kids,
Hmm.
because first of all, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And help them go out there in the little tiny sections. And then there's a section 4 to 6, and then
Hmm.
there's 7 and 8.
Hmm.
So in 4 to 6 and 7 to 8, those are separate sections. The kids have to take their little baskets or bags or whatever they have, and they have to go out. Their parents aren't allowed to go out in the field. And this is just an open field. None
Hmm.
of these are hidden. That you can,
Yeah.
you're in the grass was cut.
Yeah.
There's nothing hidden. All you got to do is go out there and pick them up, put them in a basket.
Hmm.
And there's we sponsored prizes.
Yes.
So
But yeah, I
Uh,
remember
a
doing
lot.
this when I was little. It's more of an Easter egg pickup than an Easter egg hunt because
That's
you
exactly
just
what it is.
release the children, they go run, and they just pick up the
Yes.
brightly colored eggs sitting in the grass. That's all it is.
You've been to this particular
Yes.
event at a different location, and what we do is we put little prize tickets in there.
Hmm.
Well, some of them there's a couple $100 worth of $2 bills, like
Hmm.
$2 bills in some of them, so they open up as $2 bills. And kids like $2 bills because
Yeah.
the parents like them too. They're different, you know.
Hmm.
And it's money. What the hell? And then some of them have just a candy, and some of them have candy and a little prize ticket. And then at the end of it, they bring the tickets in, and they have an age appropriate prize, like
Hmm.
water guns or Nerf guns, little Nerf balls and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Nothing huge, but we spent between the group of us, $1,500 or something on each
Hmm.
prize. So I mean, it's a kind of a neat deal. Anyway, that's the setup. So
Yeah.
I'm the bouncer for the 4 to 6 year olds, and there was a special needs kid in that group, and the parents got my attention right before
Hmm.
it started. They said, "Hey, can we get one of we had high school students as
Hmm.
volunteers. Can we get one of the high school students to go out there? I know the parents aren't allowed to go out there because we can't have the parents knocking over the kids. This is the
Yeah.
problem. We can't have parents going out. They're 4 to 6 years old. They can hold on a basket. They can put
Hmm.
the eggs in there, and the
Yes.
parents get it. The parents are the problem. The kids are fine."
Hmm.
But they asked anyway. So I deal with these people. I said, no, one of you can just go out there with him, because they said, well, he's autistic and he's special needs, and they said he might run. And this location was not too far from the interstate. So I said,
Oh
no,
no.
we're not going to volunteer. You're going to be out there with them. That's fine. I'm
Hmm.
giving you permission. Absolutely, go out there with them. Have fun, enjoy,
Hmm.
and just be careful.
Hmm.
And then so alarm goes off. The madness begins. Oh, there's not that
Yes.
many kids. And of course, one lady comes out with her kid, and I say, "Hey, ma'am, it's a children's Easter egg hunt. I need you to stay out of the Easter egg area." And she said, "There's other parents out there." She's yelling at me. "There's other
Hmm.
parents out there." I said, "I'm dealing with that." I said, "He's special needs. I'm dealing with the other one." So there's another one comes out,
Hmm.
and this little girl I think she was either 4 or 5, and so she comes out and then promptly throws a little fit because she
Hmm.
wants her mom to hold the basket while she picks up the eggs.
Hmm.
Well, I had to go over to the lady because she starts coming out, and there's not a lot of room, but in the rules are the rules. If your kid's
Hmm.
not going to do it, I'm sorry, but your kid can pick up the baskets and pick up these
Yes.
eggs,
Yeah.
right? And so I said, "Ma'am, you have to step back behind the line. It's a children's Easter egg hunt. It's not a
Hmm.
parent Easter egg hunt."
Yes.
And she just looks at me, and she like tries to go past me. I said, "Ma'am, you got to stop. All right, this is not a parent Easter egg hunt. She's old enough to carry that basket." And
Hmm.
so the kids start screaming, crying,
Oh
screaming.
no.
I don't care, and as a parent, I would have been like telling, like, if it was you, like when
Hmm.
you're little, like, you get no eggs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a good parent will do, is to
Hmm.
teach a lesson. You either behave yourself and you do what you can do, or you don't get a prize.
Hmm.
Well, this lady, it completely ignores me. Her mother, who was younger than me, which is a
Hmm.
grandmother, um, and she comes up, starts yelling at me,
Hmm.
and scolding me for ruining it for all the children. I said, "Ma'am, I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get back behind the line." So now I'm in this field with these kids, but so much time has gone past that all the other kids have hoovered up all the eggs, and now we're coming back to find the missing ones.
Hmm.
So they're already they already went up the end of the field, and now they're already coming back, and they're swooping up and getting all the eggs from this crazy mother and her kid.
Hmm.
And so so I thought of that when I thought about
Hmm.
this. It's like, yeah, I'm certain, although
Hmm.
I should maybe certain, but I'm certain these two people, this mother and the grandmother, are liberals,
Hmm.
because they would never consider that the good parenting decision would be, I'm sorry, to the kid.
Hmm.
This is the Easter egg hunt, and they should have explained it to her. You
Hmm.
take the basket, you get the eggs, you get prizes, and you get what you get. You don't throw a fit. But they didn't, and that I think encapsulates just as much as this example is,
Hmm.
of people's worldview of their role as a parent and their role as somebody relative to the government. The
Hmm.
government should treat me like a child and give
Yeah.
me stuff. And I just thought of that because it was it's the same question. If your child cries at an Easter egg hunt, do you tell the child tough, or do you go out there and pick up the eggs for him? I mean,
Hmm.
that's a similar kind of question, or
Yeah.
maybe a more specific question.
Hmm.
Because if you go out there, well, maybe you're a nurturing mother and you shouldn't make the kids cry. That's a legitimate viewpoint.
Hmm.
Um, but but the other side of it is, you know what? You got to teach them a lesson at some point to
Hmm.
do their own things.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're always
True.
gonna be picking up things. And these
Hmm.
that parent and that kid's 16 or 17-year-old old. I bet you that parent's gonna be picking up those eggs. Not figuratively,
Yeah.
not literally, but so anyway, so that was my rant, and I was
Yes.
just I was just stunned by it because
Hmm.
this didn't cost people anything; they didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah.
It was a free event for anybody who wanted to show up, and for them to cost a volunteer, and she demanded to know my name, which I immediately told her. What do I
Hmm.
care? Like, oh, what is your name? My name's Mark Bishop. I said, get back behind the line. She never did get back behind the line, but
Oh, of
whatever.
course not. No.
Then the event's over in like 5 minutes. I
Yeah.
mean, it's so fast. But it was just bizarro.
Yeah. That is weird. That is very weird.
So then she left. You'll enjoy this because you
Mm.
know the where it was.
Okay.
So she complained to the director of the
Oh.
facility where this hunt
Oh.
was,
Okay.
and then called up later and left a message because they actually had a good time because the kid got a whole bunch of prizes and stuff.
Hmm.
And I even let them exchange something that she didn't like, whatever. So
Hmm.
it's a kid at that point. It's not the kid's fault. The parents are
Yeah.
crazy, grandparent. But she called up and she left a message.
Hmm.
It said, "I just want to say, I know I complained, but I want to state that other than Mark Bishop, this event was a really fun event, and other than the behavior of Mark Bishop." I want to tell you that it was a well-run event. It was great, other than Mark Bishop.
It's really funny.
So, needless to say, we're not going to have a public Easter egg hunt next year.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
shame.
Well, I think what we're going to try to do is do a closed event, like at a school or a
Hmm.
preschool, and then it'll be more of a controlled environment, so you won't just have some randos show up
Yeah.
that don't appreciate it. It'll
Hmm.
be more organized and we'll get more kids because
Yeah.
we weren't getting enough kids. So I mean, the whole point is to get kids, prizes and have an enjoyable event. But
Hmm. Yes.
anyway, so
All
so we're
right.
gonna mix it up a little bit, I think, next year.
Yes.
Anyway, so that's another little rant. How do you like
Yes,
that?
that was a good rant. That was the preface and acknowledgements. We're going to kind of run through chapter one pretty quickly here. It's been
Very
like
good.
45 minutes.
Chapter 1, mind and politics. I
Hmm.
don't even know what we want to talk about this. He's talking about my least favorite subject, unconscious thoughts. What
Hmm.
are unconscious thoughts? I guess a dream I've forgotten. But the left love unconsciousness.
Yeah.
If it's unconscious, what difference is Hillary Clinton would say? What difference at this point does it make? If it
Hmm.
was unconscious, but he's talking about this deep, complex, sophisticated, and subtle common sense. He's talking
Hmm.
about common sense, and some people would, he doesn't accept that there's any sort of natural law, I
Yeah.
expect. But he's talking about almost like a biological sense of what is
Hmm.
common sense, but he doesn't really define it very
Yeah.
well because there are certain societal norms that I
Hmm.
think people mean by common sense.
Hmm. And that's
Yeah.
Mhm.
Go
And
ahead.
that's kind of where, the modern field of sociolinguistics has come now. It's taken that idea of the unconscious thought and things like that, and it's brought it into the race, gender, sexuality stuff. It's like, well, in your worldview, as a straight white man, you're going to have these unconscious thoughts that form the way you use language directed at this minority group, and it's inherently going to in fact impact your worldview. And I think that's really what he's talking about here,
Yes.
is like the unconscious thoughts that you've been like trained to have throughout your life. Again, denying any sort of natural law, anything like that, but what you've been conditioned to automatically think in any given situation. That's really kind of what he's talking about here, and then that frames the political worldview.
Yeah, and he makes it like he mentions an example that we commonly, this is page 5, commonly conceptualize morality in terms of financial transactions and accounting.
Hmm.
And I think that's true. I'm indebted to you, or I owe you a favor, and that kind of stuff. But he's drawing I think the opposite of the accurate, what would be the accurate conclusion is that we're describing accounting using moral terms.
Hmm.
It's not an accounting of morality. You know what I'm saying? So we're using it as an analogy to we understand the moral terms, the right and wrong, and what our
Hmm.
obligations are, and we're using those to then explain accounting
Hmm.
terms
Yeah.
and debt payments as an obligation. And so he's drawing the conclusion
Because
that
yeah.
much of moral reasoning is metaphorical reasoning, as will become apparent below. And I think the opposite conclusion exactly
Hmm.
is true, is as true, at least as true,
Hmm.
that the metaphors we're using are based upon our moral sense, or they
Hmm.
could be based upon our economic sense, and we're
Yeah.
we're vice versa. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not, you can't draw that kind of conclusion.
Mhm.
If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
it does. And I think it's good that we read, all about moral relativism right before this, because I think that's
Yes.
exactly the point that, Peter Kreeft was making is that, we use language oftentimes to reflect, what we inherently know about morality. And he's using the like exactly what you're saying. Like, well, of course we use the framework of repaying debts and what we owe people because we have a common sense that things are owed to people, that it is just to repay things. And so therefore we have a sense of this and we use the same framework because it's coming from that same moral code for both, accounting and for, morality when we talk about things, because we understand that there is a justice in giving people what they are due, right? And that is the underlying concept there. That is the real concept. It's not just something that we've created because we have, accounting. Now we've created this moral system because we have a way to talk about accounting, if that makes
Right.
sense. Mhm.
Yes. 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 So we're well into this thing.
Mhm.
Do you want to plow through this chapter, or should we stop here and then do really essentially chapter one next week?
Mhm. We could probably do chapter one next week. It's been almost an hour, and I think a lot of chapter one is just setting up the rest of the book with a lot
Yes.
of how his categorizations are here. So that'll take a little bit of time to talk about. So I think we can put chapter one off till next time and just leave it at the
I
preface and acknowledgements.
apologize for my lengthy rants. I also kind of wanted to do I don't know if you want to talk about how long we've been doing this, and if you have any thoughts now that you're about to graduate from
Hmm.
college. We started
Hmm.
this before you graduate from high school.
Yes.
Do you want to give your thoughts as to the relative merits of continuing this enterprise through this next stage of your life?
Is this, do I have to convince you that we still should do this? Is that what this is?
No, no. Well, I mean, I think I've
Hmm.
told you. I know I've told other people. My whole point of view on this is, all right. One of my sons wants to devote an uninterrupted hour of his life at least once a week to talk about important moral, philosophical, and religious issues with me.
Hmm.
Hell yeah, I'm going to do that. And the only objection I have to it is that we share it with anybody. So yeah, I'm all in. I mean, as long as whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, I really
no,
enjoy it. I do. I think, we've, like you said, we're going on what 3.5 years now. It'll be 4 in November. It's been the entire time of my college career that we've been doing this thing. But I've enjoyed it, and I think it is also helpful for me just to kind of talk through these things in a way, to read these books, not just to read these books, but also to talk about my thoughts on them and sort of reason out, exactly where I stand. Because I think that's helpful for anybody is to talk about, not just to read and just take what you're reading at face value, but also just to talk through it, even if just like with yourself almost, to sort of say, okay, well, here's what my thoughts are and sort of arrange things that way. I think that's been very helpful, through these 8 books that we've read now at this point.
and what I'm getting a little nervous about is that we don't disagree enough. But we did disagree for almost an entire season about what was it? Omniscience,
Hmm.
God, and
Yes.
something else, free will, or something like
Hmm.
that. But I'm getting a little nervous that I may be brainwashing you or something.
I don't think that's true.
All right, good. Yeah, so yeah, it is helpful to and for me, it's the beginning of it. Of course, the first season was history of
Western
Western
philosophy.
philosophy, which was something I studied decades before, so it
Hmm.
kind of got me back into it. And in fact, I probably would not have. That's what got me kind of interested in thinking about those things again. And I probably would never have started teaching
Hmm.
if we had started this podcast. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know.
Hmm.
But I'm into my third semester. I'm doing a course over the summer too.
Oh, nice.
So I'll be doing one, each I'll be doing three courses. Although they're the most boring courses in the world because it's real estate law and contract law. So I'll be doing
Hmm.
contract law in the summer and the fall. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make it interesting, but my
Hmm.
God.
Yeah,
It's kind of
that's brutal.
yes. But anyway, so it's been a benefit for me in other ways
Yes.
too.
Well, maybe we'll disagree a little bit on this book going forward, since it is
Mm,
more linguistics based, or maybe it'll
yeah, that's
just,
true.
put
Yeah.
all of my critiques of the field of linguistics and notable linguistics, people out there on the internet as I'm about to go into
Mhm.
linguistics grad school. Which, there you go.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't, I haven't thought much about the field of linguistics.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't mean that I don't think much of it. Like I
Yes.
think it's bad. I just haven't thought much about it.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think it is important. I think that's, I hope that's the conclusion we come to, that it is important, what language we use and how language interacts with our worldviews on things. I think we're going to disagree with a lot of what he says, should be our worldview and how he comes to a lot of his conclusions. Because I mean, it is a very, very much a relativist. It's exactly the relativist mindset that we were seeing last time, where he's nominally like, well, everything is just subjective, but he very, very clearly has an idea of what is right and what is wrong. He's already starting from a principle that there is no reality behind a lot of these things. These abstract concepts have no reality, and a lot of them are just created, and we're talking about them in metaphors because they don't really exist in any true way. So he's already coming at
Right.
it in this very relativist slash very absolutist perspective that everything is subjective, but my opinion is objectively correct about everything, which is exactly what we talked about all of last season.
Really wild. It
Hmm.
really is. It was jarring to read this initial
Hmm.
section where he clearly has that a moral absolutist view
Hmm.
of his own
Hmm.
philosophy, but he ascribes it generally to
Hmm.
everybody as oh,
He's
there's
trying
no
to.
true,
Hmm.
no true religion or no true truth
Hmm.
that applies to everybody,
Hmm.
but except for mine. That
Yeah.
of course I'm right about,
Mhm.
and you effing conservatives can pound sand.
Yeah. Well,
But
maybe you'll understand, my gripes with linguistics as we go through this, because I think this is so far been very exemplary of a lot of the problems that I see with the modern field as it stands, and this is 30 years ago, so you can kind of reason that it's only gotten worse from here.
well, it takes somebody to reform, and
True.
so going to that field, it takes somebody that has some competence and
Hmm.
understanding the subject matter to say, well, you say X, but it's really not X,
Hmm.
and this is why. And,
Hmm.
and I do think, and I do think, and I'm hopeful that this book will help us, and it'll probably help you a lot because it'll explain the worldview of those linguistics professors that believe in what this guy believes
Hmm.
in, and be able to communicate with them on their level
Hmm.
in order to eventually change the field of linguistics to get it so that it's more reality based and fact
Yeah.
based as opposed to left wing ideology just being
Hmm.
shoved down the students' throats. Not
Yeah.
I'm not. Neither one of us is saying that's what happened at Truman or
Hmm.
anywhere else, but I think it could if you don't have somebody in academia that can write an intelligent and articulate explanation of a different viewpoint.
Hmm.
And I think this may help you, but going into grad school
Yeah.
in that subject, because you're certainly going to be running into this philosophy, I'm
Hmm.
sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's still dominant or not, I would expect it will be, but so it should be helpful.
Yes, I
And I'll
agree.
just I'm already thinking, and this is I
Uh-oh.
hate to do this, but I'm already thinking that I got to watch what I say because I really don't want to affect your future
Hmm.
any more than I already have negatively. Um, and so and then if we continue this when you're in England, we got to be really careful. They don't have a
That's true.
limit over there. I don't know
Mm.
stuff. I don't know.
Yes. Well, do you have any other final thoughts before we end the episode here and talk about chapter one next time?
Other than I apologize for monopolizing the conversation.
No, that's all right. Your rants were very interesting. It's very entertaining for sure. But no, I'm looking forward to it. I think I kind of summarized what my thoughts are already. I think it's good that we're coming off of the back of this last book. I
Yes.
think it should be interesting. Really looking into how the linguists look at things, like what you were saying, because I've gotten a taste of it, but this is very much describing it at length, over 400 pages. I guess we should talk about the length of the book. The book is very long, so we'll have like I don't know, 16, oh no, 23 chapters in here, so we'll have probably 23 more episodes, and then
Long
I
as
should
you quit. we might have to double up.
Yeah,
You
we
know,
might have to. Yeah,
'cause we can probably push through 1 and 2. I already read 1, so
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
next
Maybe
time
next time. Yeah,
maybe we can try to
yeah. But
condense it a little bit.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But if you have no other thoughts, then this
Nope.
has been season 8, episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions for updates when the next episodes are live. We're also now on YouTube. I think I mentioned that last time, that Buzzsprout has like an integrated YouTube thing where it turns your podcast into like a YouTube video where it just has like a static image. But that's another place that you can find us. We're on all of the platforms. So subscribe to us or follow us or like our stuff or whatever.
So could we
Um,
post the video of us talking? I guess we probably could.
we could. It records everything when we're on Zoom. Of course, then the problem is when we're in person, no video is being recorded. But I guess theoretically, I could throw the video on here. I don't know how
I'm not
good it
suggesting
looks.
it. I'm not.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd have to have a background instead of my unfinished basement.
that's true. That is true. But yeah, check us out on all of the podcast stuff. But I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
All right. I think that was good. That was a good first look at all that.
Yeah, it was a long discussion about a preface.
That's what we do.